Get over here!
Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here with something a little different. I've been pouring hours into Monster Hunter Rise recently, and with a new Monster Hunter title comes a new wave of unique and powerful monsters alongside returning staples. And you know what else is coming out soon? Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl! And I cannot wait to revisit Gen 4. So that got me thinking. Monster Hunter monsters are basically just that world's Pokémon, right? Except you beat the shit out of them instead of making them beat the shit out of each other, but you know. So, if by some crazy miraculous collaboration between Capcom and Game Freak, if Monster Hunter Rise were treated like a Pokemon game, what would that look like? Well, it would look like Monster Hunter Stories, but that's not what I'm at, shut up. What I'm talking about is, what would each of these monsters be like if directly translated into Pokemon mechanics? What would their types and abilities be? How would all of this play out if we traveled to the Pokemon region of Kamura? That's what we're going to discuss today. And yes, I know I probably sound like Loxton and Noggin right now, but that's kind of the point since I was inspired to do this by him. Seriously, if you're into Pokemon at all, I highly recommend checking him out. Love your videos, Loxton, keep being awesome. Also, just a quick disclosure, this is nothing but a silly little discussion video, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I did my research and discussed it with friends, but I don't claim to be the master ranking champion of either Pokemon or Monster Hunter. I'm more of a Jaggers of all trades, if you will. Also, I'm only going to be talking about the monsters in Rise for this video, but if you like this and want to see more, maybe I'll do a future video discussing monsters from previous titles, and perhaps catch up on any monsters added to Rise in the inevitable future updates. Make sure you got your Pokeballs and Ancient Potions handy. It's time to discuss the Monster Hunter Rise monsters as Pokemon. So Great Izuchi is a good one to start with, as it's one of the monsters first introduced in Rise, and will establish a little rule I have about certain monsters. His type would be normal, as he's just a greater version of the Izuchi. That's a little distinction I have with these great monsters. They're all gonna have normal as one of their types, as they are just bigger versions of smaller, normal monsters. As for abilities, well, they seem pretty frightening in their intro with their hunting tactics, so I think Intimidate would work. I can also see Super Luck since their main method of attack is a Scythe-like tail, so critical hits could be a thing with it. That'll make sense to you D&D players out there. Great Baggi would be another normal monster, but given that it lives in the frigid climate of the Frost Islands, I decided to give it the Ice type as well. Mono-normal could still work, but I think normal Ice works as well. Its ability would be Insomnia, as it's one of the monsters that heavily resists the sleep status. That's also this monster's main attack, so I imagine it would know moves like Sleep Powder. Or in this case, Sleep Spit? Kuluyaku, a silly dodo that loves to steal things. It's not a great monster, but it reminds me of Doduo, so I could see normal flying, but this thing doesn't really do any flying, so I settled with mono-normal. As for its abilities, either pick up or pickpocket, easily. I can also imagine it knowing moves like Thief or Fling. You know, maybe it could be normal dark so it can get stab on those moves, but let's stick with mono-normal. Next is Great Roggy, and just like before, normal type. I'm also going to throw Poison in there, as its main method of attack is its Poisonous Bile. There really isn't much to go on that I can use to determine its abilities, but I think Liquid Ooze works. Maybe Unnerve just to give it a little variety, and this thing does look a bit unsettling, so yeah, I think that's fine. Kicking it up a notch, next we have Arzuris. I compare this thing to Pokemon like Snorlax or Ursaring, the big, bulky, normal-type beatsticks. I did hear an argument for Rock type, as its arms are hard as stone, but I settled with mono-normal, as the rock-hard features of its claws could be relegated to its abilities. It would either have Honey Gather, since it likes to steal honey, or Battle Armor for those rough and tough arms. But now we get into monsters that might have hidden abilities. Arzuris would have Tough Claws, potentially making it a competitive threat. You're probably curious as to my thoughts on Apex Arzuris, but for simplicity's sake I'm gonna cover the Apex monsters at the end of the video, so look forward to that. Finally breaking the normal streak, we have the Lagombi. It lives in the Frost Islands, slides around in the snow, and pelts you with snowballs, so yeah, Ice type. I can see the argument for normal Ice, but Mono Ice works fine. Its ability would either be Slush Rush for sliding around in the snow, or Fur Coat to give it an extra layer of defense. Its hidden ability could be Snow Cloak, as this thing gets really tricky to hit once it starts slipping sliding all over the place. Volvidon, I am shocked to say, would not be Fire type. You would think given its coloration that this thing likes to roll around in the lava caverns, but no, this thing has no pyromancy to speak of. I also thought maybe bug type since it gives me some serious dung beetle vibes, but upon closer inspection, it's more of an armadillo with a chameleon-like tongue. So, I settled with rock poison type. This thing's shell is tough as nails, and the way it rolls around the area, it would take serious advantage of moves like defense curl and rollout. The poison typing would come from its unique ability to soil hunters with its secretions. And speaking of which, one of its abilities would easily be stench, while the other would be shell armor. Its hidden ability would then be heatproof, which would make sense for any Volvidon who live comfortably in an active volcano. Aknosom, the graceful feathered frenzy of the Komodo region. This is the monster that assured me that Rise was going to be awesome, giving hunters a really cool and unique monster design with a respectable early game challenge. Given its signature fire breath and avian wings, its typing would be fire flying. I could also see fighting type going in there somewhere since its attacks are pretty skillful and controlled, but fire flying makes just a bit more sense to me. As for abilities, one of them would be Intimidate, as it does use its frills and parasol-like shape to intimidate its foes, and then Gale Wing so it can quicken moves like Wing Attack and Aerial Ace. And I can see its hidden ability being Scrapper, giving it that fighting flair that I mentioned earlier. Next is Royal Ludroth, and I'm gonna put a caveat on this one. Yes, Royal Ludroth is basically a greater version of a plain old Ludroth, but I wouldn't actually call them a normal type. Instead, pure water. Now, I know what you're thinking. Royal Ludroth is weak to fire in the actual game, so water wouldn't make sense, right? Unless you give it the Dry Skin ability. Suddenly, the Royal Ludroth absorbs all water-type moves, regains health in the rain, loses health in harsh sunlight, and takes extra damage from fire-type moves. Perfect! Barroth is a pretty simple monster, yet also a dangerous one. He's one of the first real walls most players run into, since you can't just curb stomp this thing willy-nilly. So it's fitting for this wall of a monster to be rock ground type. He has an exterior as tough as stone, and he's all about rolling around in the mud to up his defenses. He would also be another good candidate for the Dry Skin ability, as he's immune to water and super vulnerable to fire in the actual game. Also, Dry Skin is just really good for a rock ground type. I can also see his hidden ability possibly being Rockhead because, well, obviously. I bet he knows Head Smash. Kizu. This thing is disgusting, just gonna put that out there. But disgusting in a strangely intriguing way, I'll admit. I settled on electric type for Kizu. I skirted around the idea of adding the bug typing in there because he's kinda leech-like, but I don't think that's enough to warrant the addition. I could also see the argument for dark type, but aside from his grotesque appearance, the only dark thing about him is that he lives in caves. So I think mono electric suits him fine. No sense adding extra weaknesses for no reason. As for abilities, Unnerve would fit because I don't think I'd be in the mood to eat berries while looking at this thing. Keen Eye would also work, but perhaps give it a different name because, well, Kizu's blind. But despite that, it can still attack hunters just fine, so I doubt moves like Sand Attack and Kinesis are gonna do much to it. As for a hidden ability, Long Reach, since one of its signature moves is reaching out and attacking with its long, stretchy, leech-like neck. I don't think I'm gonna catch one of these. Tetranodon is a big Kappa platypus monster that had to grow on me a bit, but I did end up liking this thing in the end, especially after figuring out what its typing would be. Tetranodon would be water fighting type, as many of Tetranodon's attacks resemble that of a sumo wrestler, thrusting his palms forward as he slides across the water's surface and stomping the ground to create shockwaves. He even does the thing where sumo wrestlers throw sand towards the arena, but in his case they manifest as these small sonic booms. Neat! His ability would absolutely be Gluttony, but I can also see Thick Fat as a hidden ability to really solidify his role as a big, bulky bruiser. Bishaten was hard to determine for this video. He's one of the more unorthodox monsters in this game, being this monkey bird-like monster who pelts you with fruit, all of which can cause different effects. He does remind me a lot of Apom though, and I can't really see a justification for anything else other than normal type. I thought maybe grass type, but honestly, starting food fights a grass type does not make. He would definitely have grass moves, though. As for abilities, Harvest is an easy one, allowing him to make good use of berries. Prankster would also be good, since it is mentioned in his bio that Bishaten is a tricky monster that loves messing with hunters. Puke Puke! Love saying that name. A cute little chameleon wyvern with a strong tongue and an even stronger stomach. This dude would be poison flying for sure. And I know some of you are thinking, hey, shouldn't the wyverns be dragon type? Well, here's the thing, Monster Hunter has a lot of wyverns, so we have to be a little selective with that type or else this is going to become Dragon Con. As for abilities, I decided on Runaway. Its bio does mention that Puke Puke is a bit of a coward and tends to flee at the sight of stronger monsters. Poison Touch could also be good, though perhaps for its hidden ability, since in-game, not every attack it throws at you will actually poison you. Juratotus. Not a fan of this guy. If you ask me, Beototus in Iceborne does his whole thing but better, though I'll admit he's at least better than Lavasioth. Anyway, off topic. Juratotus is a semi-aquatic monster that's all about mud, so water-ground type fits perfectly. He's basically the Swampert of Monster Hunter. I could definitely see Swift Swim as he gets pretty speedy in the water, and maybe Weak Armor as a secondary as he becomes pretty vulnerable once you knock the mud off of him. Basarios! Oh, this thing's a beast. He's basically a supersized Dwebble but a Wyvern instead of a Hermit Crab. Pure Rock type works perfectly for him, no surprises there. But what is surprising is what I came up for with his ability. Now, you'd think maybe something like Battle Armor or Rockhead, right? Nope. Effect Spore. Think about it. He attacks with a powder-like substance that can either put you to sleep, poison you, or explode to set you on fire. He'd probably be a tank Pokemon who would know all of the powder moves, and getting close to him makes you more susceptible to those spores. I know other abilities could definitely fit Basarios, but Effect Spore strikes me as the most interesting possibility. Now, Somnicanth is a monster that I fell in love with immediately. A swift siren who sings a serenade of slumber, subjecting unsuspecting slayers into a sweet, sound sleep. Given the obvious mermaid theming, I think Water Fairy is perfect for Somnicanth. One of its abilities could be Swift Swim, as it's pretty speedy in the water. However, its other ability I feel should be Liquid Voice. I know that's the signature ability of Primarina, but given the similarities, I think it's fine if they share. Next up is Rathian, a classic Monster Hunter alumni alongside Rathalos. This one is interesting because I had to determine Rathian's type and abilities in relation to her royal counterpart. Rathian would be Fire Poison, both of which it utilizes very well. You're probably wondering if it should have the Flying type, but keep in mind that Rathian's title is Queen of the Land, whereas Rathalos is King of the Skies. Not to mention that Rathian doesn't actually do a lot of flying while she's fighting you. She would have Levitate as an ability though to offset the lack of the Flying type. It could also have Poison Point, as much of Rathian's body is covered in venomous barbs, particularly her tail. So how does Rathalos shape up in comparison? Considering that Rathalos does a lot more flying during the battle against him, and he's much more about burning you to death, I feel he's the perfect recipient for the Fire Flying type. This guy is also often considered a king among monsters, lesser monsters fleeing or at least preparing to defend themselves should Rathalos decide to pay a visit, so Intimidate would work great for its ability. Additionally, it could share that distinction with his queen by also having access to Poison Point, since his body is also covered in venomous barbs. Actually, now that I think about it, that would make them comparable to Nidoking and Nidoqueen. Awesome! Barroth! Gotta say, buddy, you got nerfed hard in Rise. I remember back in Iceborne, you kicked my ass pretty badly. Still a cool monster, though. Literally, because it would be pure Ice type. Boo! As for abilities, definitely Strong Jaw, because... well, come on. I can imagine him being a Pokemon with high speed and attack power who could also utilize the bite moves. Oh geez, imagine an Ice-type Barroth who could use Fire Fang. Moving on to Tobikadachi, and I can already see the Emolga comparisons coming in. Not that it would be inaccurate, Tobikadachi would definitely be Electric Flying type. Flexible on his abilities though, there are a lot of them that could fit Toby just fine, but the two I think would fit best are either Static or Lightning Rod. Easy peasy. Magnamalo. This monster is awesome. Easily one of my new favorites in the series. Coming up with a type for him actually proved a bit difficult because it could go in a few different directions, but I ultimately settled on Dark Steel type. I could also see Dark Fire, but I think Dark Steel works better because of how he's designed. Magnamalo's body is supposed to be reminiscent of traditional samurai armor and has the durability to match. As for the Dark type, well, he's basically an Oni and channels the dark power of Hellfire. I did want to incorporate the firepower in there somewhere, so I feel Magnamalo would have the Flash Fire ability. Dark Aura could also work, as I totally could see him using moves like Dark Pulse. Anjanath is another simple but effective monster, a T-Rex with some serious power and even more serious anger issues. He's also got a huge funky nose that sneezes fire at you, so yeah, pure fire type. It's tempting to say Fire Rock. Ancient fossil Pokemon usually have the distinction of being rock type, but there's also a lot of dinosaurs in Monster Hunter, so I never found a clear answer on just how old Anjanath's species really is. Hold that thought though. As for abilities, this thing has a short fuse and will attack anything around it, so Intimidate or Anger Point I think fit Anjanath perfectly. Nargacuga is seriously cool. One of my favorite monsters actually, mainly because he doesn't pull any cheap tricks, and yet still provides a nice challenge through speed and power alone. He's definitely pure dark type, not just due to his design, but also his sheer ferocity and mercilessness once he becomes enraged. I can imagine Nargacuga being a sweeper who can put its speed to good use, so Unburden would be a great ability for it. On the other hand, Infiltrator could also work, as Nargacuga is all about stalking its prey from the shadows and ambushing it at the right opportunity. Now, fun fact about the Misutsune, it's actually among the most docile monsters in the franchise, possibly even more than the Dodogama if you can believe it. The Misutsune you end up hunting turns out only to be dangerous due to the rampage, or maybe it became super aggressive during its mating season. As for typing, Water Fairy makes way too much sense, similar to Somnicanth. It's clearly a water monster, but also has a certain level of whimsical mastery of water that could possibly be explained by nature magic, hence its use of Bubble Blight. Its abilities would either be Dancer or Water Bubble, but I can also see Swift Swim as a hidden ability, alluding to when it Bubble Blights itself to increase its own mobility. Now, my experience with Goss Harag was a process of endearment that lasted about a minute before I fell completely in love. I was like, huh, a Yeti, that's cool. Whoa, this thing fights pretty well, impressive. Oh lord, it freezes its own claws to create ice blades. Okay, this thing is awesome. So, yeah, ice fighting type for sure. Its ability could either be Hypercutter or Tough Claws to really sell those icy arms, but then have its hidden ability be Refrigerate. I can totally see this guy converting normal moves like Slash into ice-type stab moves. Almudrom is interesting. In my opinion, he's just a more notable Duratotus with the whole mud monster motif. And the standard typing for all mud Pokemon is Water Ground, so yeah. It could have moves like Lava Plume too, simulating its golden molten mud that it flings around, and that'd be nice for covering its ×4 grass weakness. As for its ability, Arena Trap. I do wish it was more pronounced in the actual game, but I like the fact that Almudrom basically creates these big mud spires that limit your traversal. I think Arena Trap can simulate that nicely. Zinogre. This good boy right here might just be my favorite monster in the franchise, and yes, I wouldn't mind doing a countdown about that in the future in due time, my friends. Anyway, Zinogre would be pure electric type, though there is an argument for electric fighting since its attacks are very acrobatic and skillful. But I feel there isn't quite enough here to justify adding the fighting type. I mean, since when has doing flips and spins guaranteed a fighting type? As for its abilities, either Motor Drive or Lightning Rod to simulate its ability to power up via the electricity it absorbs from the Thunderbugs. You know, now that I think about it, what would those Thunderbugs be in the Pokemon world? Volbeat? Joltik? Vikavolt? Oh god, this fight just got a lot scarier. Tigrex is ruthless, aggressive, angry, and incredibly dangerous. There's no way this thing isn't Rock Dark type. His natural behavior is more than enough to justify the dark typing, and he would also fulfill the classic fossil Pokemon archetype since he himself is basically a living fossil, his form unchanged over the centuries. Also, one of his signature moves is literally throwing boulders at you. As for abilities, Intimidate is an easy one, but I can also see him having Punk Rock. Maybe just with a different name. See, Tigrex is the one monster in the game whose roar actually damages anyone nearby, so he'd make great use of Hyper Voice. Maybe call the ability Primal Voice or something. And to top it all off, give him Sheer Force as his hidden ability. Given his Unga Bunga fighting style, I think he totally deserves it. Diablos was pretty easy. He'd be the classic desert Pokemon, a ground type gaining advantages in a sandstorm. As such, his abilities would either be Sand Force or Sand Rush, and then maybe Sandstream for the hidden ability. Though, to be fair, you could interchange which one of those abilities was the hidden one, since all of them would be extremely useful for Diablos. Raknakadaki is an awesome monster. A volcanic broodmother spider with a great sense of fashion, if I do say so myself. This queen is Firebug without a doubt, and her abilities would either be Swarm or Flame Body. You could go either way here, but I do like the idea of Flame Body since Raknakadaki literally uses heated egg sacs to care for her young. As for a hidden ability, Parental Bond. I know that ability has the potential to be super busted, but come on. Raknakadaki's babies literally assist her in fighting you, becoming miniature flamethrowers and even tethers. Man, this monster is cool. Now here we're getting into our first Elder Dragon with one of my personal favorites, Kushala Daora. Yeah, I know, call me crazy. Just as we made the distinction that the great monsters would be normal type in some way, I feel the Elder Dragons should be our true dragon types. As such, Kushala Daora would not be Dragon Steel type. Okay, hear me out on this one. Kushala Daora would actually be Dragon Flying, as he is often considered the master of the wind, and certainly demonstrates his aerial mastery required for such a title. It actually wouldn't make sense for Kushala to be Steel-type because he is pathetically easy to poison. Instead, he would have the Steelworker ability. That way, he would have the advantages of a Dragon Flying type, but still be susceptible to poison, and still get stab bonus from Steel-type moves. All that's left is adding Iron Defense to his move pool. Perfect! Next up is Chameleos, and there are so many directions you can go with this trickster. He's an elusive chameleon that blends into his surroundings, covers the battlefield in mist, steals your items, and is one of the few monsters with access to venom, which is far more powerful than your standard poison. Sounds like a dragon poison to me, but its abilities were tough to pin down. To reflect the thief in him, Frisk. To reflect the venom, Corrosion. And then the hidden ability to reflect his color-changing ability, Protean. Yeah, color change is a thing, but Protean is much more befitting a powerful Elder Dragon if you ask me. Next is Teostra, the great beast of fire. So obviously Dragon Fire. Yeah, I know he's more of a lion than a dragon, but hey, we've had plenty of non-dragon dragon-type Pokemon, and he's categorized as an Elder Dragon, so I think he deserves it. His abilities could be a few things, either Flash Fire or Flame Body, and Drought as his hidden ability. Also, side note, I can imagine Teostra's signature Supernova attack to be replicated in Pokemon via Overheat. After all, they behave pretty similarly in that they exhaust the user afterward. Rajang. Oh lordy, this monstrous monkey is feared by hunters and monsters alike, and for good reason. Talk to any Monster Hunter player about some of the most dangerous monsters in the franchise, and I can guarantee you, Rajang will be brought up in some way. Given that he's a blatant reference to the Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z, Rajang would totally be electric fighting. He has a plethora of hard-hitting martial attacks, and that electric Kamehameha would basically be equivalent to Zap Cannon. As such, I can imagine Rajang being a mixed attacker, and his abilities would reflect this. He would have Moxie if you wanted a physical Rajang, and Berserk if you wanted a special Rajang. So basically he's Infernape, but maybe with the stats of a pseudo-legendary. Basil Juice! Basil Geese? Basil Guys? Bagel Jesus? I never got a straight answer on how the hell this thing's name is pronounced. I'm gonna go with Basil Juice since he's actually based on the star Beetlejuice. And a B2 bomber, I swear. Anyway, Basil Juice would be Fire Dark type. He's all about explosions and being an annoying-ass party crasher, so that fits well. And given that he flies around all the time, his ability would be Levitate. I can also see Infiltrator though, since he absolutely insists on being involved when he's not invited. Seriously, this guy would be the Monster Hunter poster boy for invasive species if Deviljho didn't exist. That being said, I have to admit, I love this thing. Moving on to the antagonists of Monster Hunter Rise, there's the Wind Serpent Ibushi. These next few will kind of tie into each other a bit, since Ibushi and Narwa are basically Fujin and Raijin of Shinto myth. If anything, they'd be the box legendaries. Ibushi having mastery over wind would make him the dragon flying type. I imagine he'd have a unique ability, as many legendaries get, but if we can only use pre-existing Pokemon abilities, I'd say Air-related would work great for him, charging all of his normal attacks into Gale-based flying attacks. We can treat Thunder Serpent Narwa similarly, Dragon Electric type with the electric equivalent ability Galvanize. This would emphasize that these two are the true masters of wind and lightning, though again, I could totally see them having unique abilities. And with their powers combined, they come together to give rise to Narwa the All-Mother. Kinda like Reshiram and Zekrom once being part of Kyurem. Or Ultra Necrozma. Yeah, this is already an established Pokemon mechanic. Anyway, Narwa the All-Mother is an absolute unit, super strong and able to psychically link to our resident quest handlers Hinoa and Minoto. As such, Dragon Psychic is perfect for her. A type combination like that would make for a stupidly powerful Pokemon. And said powerful Pokemon deserves a powerful ability, Neuroforce. Again, ideally she'd get an all-new ability, but for what Pokemon provides us, I think this works well. The last monster added to Monster Hunter Rise as of now came in the form of Crimson Glow Valstrax. My friends were pretty excited when he was announced, and as this was my first encounter with Valstrax, I was curious to see what he was all about. He did not disappoint, this monster is incredible. He's basically a military-grade rocket in dragon form. However, I was informed that Crimson Glow Valstrax is actually an enraged version of regular Valstrax from previous games, so Dragon Dark works great for this Valstrax in particular. As for abilities, I can definitely see Levitate as this guy flies around a lot, but I can also see Speed Boost. Speed is kind of this guy's thing. And that is all of the regular monsters in Monster Hunter Rise so far, but as those of you who have played the game already know, the Rampage is a unique mode of Rise where you defend Kamura Village from a stampede of monsters, and then have to deal with super-powered versions called Apex monsters. And the game eventually made it possible to hunt them individually. I wasn't originally going to talk about the Apex monsters, as they just seemed like more powerful versions of monsters we already have, but my friend Z informed me that these are in fact based on monster variants from previous games. So I still think we can talk about them without treading old ground too much. It's almost like having Alolan forms now that I think about it. Or maybe these are Mega Evolutions? Those change types and abilities, so yeah, let's go with that. So let's start with Apex Arzuris, who is based on Red Helm Arzuris from Monster Hunter Generations. Like most of the Apex monsters, actually. Seeing as regular Arzuris is normal type and the whole point of the Rampage is that these Apex monsters are going berserk, Apex Arzuris could be pure Dark type. Don't worry, I'm not gonna slap Dark type on all of these and call it a day, but it made sense to me here. His ability would still be Tough Claws, but another distinction we'll make with the Apex monsters is that they also have access to the Pressure ability. It makes sense since the whole idea of the Apex monsters is that they are influenced by the Rampage caused by Ibushi and Narwa, and now are emitting an ominous pressure. Apex Rathian is based on Dread Queen Rathian and actually has access to Venom like Chameleos. Apex Rathian can definitely remain Fire Poison type, but her abilities would definitely change to either Pressure or Corrosion. Makes sense too now that I think about it, it would basically make Apex Rathian similar to the likes of Salazzle. And following that, Apex Rathalos is based on Dread King Rathalos, and, well, he really just gets more fiery. Rightfully so though, this guy's flames hurt. As such, I'd say Apex Rathalos can get the Blaze ability along with the Pressure ability, as well as a substantial special attack boost, open and shut case. Apex Misutsune, on the other hand, threw me for a loop. This one is based on Soulseer Misutsune, and for some reason gets access to Hellfire Blight like Magna Malo. I think this might be my favorite of the Apex variants. Supposedly, Soulseer Misutsune has a mental capacity that is much more enhanced compared to the regular Misutsune. And considering the way it controls the Hellfire bubbles it creates, I think Water Psychic works here. As for abilities, Pressure of course, but also Dark Aura, matching Magna Malo to make good use of the Hellfire Blight. Like, seriously, imagine Apex Misutsune with Dark Pulse or Fiery Wrath. Next is Apex Diablos, who is based on Bloodbath Diablos, and considered to be very similar to Vanilla Diablos, but way more ruthless. We can definitely go with Ground Dark type for this one, and its ability either being Pressure or Steam Engine. This thing gets fast when it's enraged, and given how its typing would work, Steam Engine can definitely reflect that. Though, I'll admit, I'm flexible on this one. You could also have Sandstream or something else befitting its cruelty. And last but certainly not least, Apex Zinogre, based on Thunderlord Zinogre. Man, that is an awesome title. Apex Zinogre shares the penchant for destruction and rage that the other Apex monsters do, so Electric Dark works great here. But then again, given his acrobatic attacks and control, I could also see Electric Fighting for this one as well. As for abilities, Pressure once again, but also Electric Surge. Apex Zinogre is known to charge the very air around him, so this would work perfectly. And that's all of them. Wow, this ended up being a much more involved project than I first expected, but damn if it wasn't fun. If you guys want to see more of this, please let me know in the comments and give the video a like. Maybe eventually I'll look into the monsters from the rest of the series, maybe do another video like this covering the monsters from Monster Hunter World Iceborne. I might even find some grass or ghost types, which were strangely absent from this video, but it makes sense as most of the monsters are beast-like rather than plants, and everything is, well, alive. Either way, hope you had fun. And on that note, stay safe and happy hunting.